Uh, Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you very much for this. It's a disgrace what has happened to our infrastructure in this country. And it is going to be up to this Congress to finally address it. It's a mess. You know, our roads and bridges are crumbling, public transit rail programs remain underfunded, our water infrastructure is antiquated. And potholes don't fix themselves. We're going to have a sustainable funding source, and I will support that. You know, we've got the American Society of Engineers giving Vermont a C in infrastructure, and that makes us better than the grade it gives to our whole country, which is D+. There is no excuse for that. 299 bridges in Vermont are structurally deficient. 29% of our roads are in poor or very poor condition. And Vermont, like other small and rural states, relies heavily on federal transportation funding. It's about 50% of our budget. We've made progress, as many states have, by investing, going to their taxpayers, but we can't do it without a federal transportation and infrastructure policy. I had a chance to meet with our local officials, mayors in the largest cities in Vermont, with the Vermont legislature and the transportation committees, and with local officials. And I want to outline what it is they conveyed to me were their priorities. Number one, identify a stable and reliable funding source and maintain current funding ratios among the states. Otherwise, it's going to be a Band-Aid solution. Recently, we were passing transportation bills on a 3-month basis. You can't plan a bridge, let alone build a bridge in 3 months. And we've got to bite the bullet on funding. I will be supportive of any practical approach that raises the revenue so that we can meet our obligations to our states and our communities. Number two, fund discretionary grant programs. There's an enormous amount of leadership in local communities where there's a huge investment in trying to get it right so they can build a transportation system and an infrastructure system that helps their local communities. That drives down decision-making to the local level. Let's continue that. Next, let's invest in water infrastructure. We have water systems that go back to the Civil War in Rutland, Vermont. And this is a situation that exists throughout our communities in Vermont and around the country. And local property taxpayers aren't going to be able to do that on their own. We need airport improvement. Vermont has 10 state-owned airports, and they provide a vital connector to rural communities. We want full funding of the airport improvement program that'll help get us the money that we need for major repairs and improvements. We want to increase rail funding for bridge and track rehabilitation. You know, we have legacy rail lines, and the tracks just are there, but they're not in good enough shape to take enormous advantage of that infrastructure that we once were very proud of and now is withering. So we want funding for programs like the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvement Bill. That provides flexible funding necessary for us in Vermont to meet our needs. Next, invest in alternative sources of transportation. Public transit and other alternative forms of transportation are very important in places like Vermont. We would benefit significantly from an increase in the rural formula operating funds. We've received $4 million annually from the program, which is 3 times less than what we need to fully fund our obligations. And finally, let's prioritize climate change resiliency. We don't have to argue about climate change. We all see what's happened in our own communities. And we all know when we talk to local officials, we have to have more resilient systems. And that has to be organically ingrained in the legislation that will come out of this committee. I want to thank my colleagues. You're the tip of the spear for us in Congress, but you have support from Republicans and Democrats to do something bold and big, and we know our nation needs it. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to introduce into the record a letter that I wrote to your committee and make it part of the record. Thank you very much for all that you've done to help us.
Without objection, thank you. And now I would like to